Chapter 79. I know it's not meant to be, an angel like you and a devil like me. Still here you are, smiling so. Please understand, I can never let you go. The following weeks, Jenny spent a lot of time with Diego. To her surprise, she discovered he had friends, all of them bikers. Some of them trained enduro and trial in the gravel pit in the forest. To her horror, she learned that it was far from unusual for Diego to drive over the precipice in the collapsed road. He and his friends even organized chicken races, where two drove towards the precipice and the one who dared to jump won. She refused to be around when they played their dangerous, ridiculous macho games. Instead, she joined once a week when a group of bikers met up at Ullevi Stadium before driving off together, along roads that were worth experiencing on a motorcycle. This fall, she had ridden almost as far as she had in all the years she had had a motorcycle. She was becoming a skilled rider. She was also becoming good at working on motorcycles. Before she met Diego, she had barely dared to change brake pads for fear of putting them on wrong. Now she was sitting on her knees, changing the voltage regulator on a motorcycle Diego was adjusting the valves on. She followed the process he had taught her. Every little piece she took off, she put on a newspaper. Everything was put in a long line in the order she removed it. The screw she first unscrewed was put first in line, then the washer, then the next screw, the next washer, the cover, the gasket, and so on. When she was ready to put it all back, all she had to do was to start from the end of her cue. Then everything would end up in the right place again. When she had disconnected the voltage regulator from the Suzuki, she asked Diego where to put it. He nodded at a large box of scrap metal by the door. Since it was November, it was too cold to work outdoors, so he put whatever motorcycle he worked on in the barracks. Even without saddle, fairings and tank, the motorcycle took up a lot of the floor space. They had been working on the Suzuki for more than an hour, in silence. Diego was not what you would call talkative. He could work for hours without saying a word. Sometimes Jenny liked the silence. Sometimes, like now, she got tired of it. Diego? She looked at him over the frame of the motorcycle. He looked up. There's this thing I've been thinking about. When it had just happened, he had long ago learned that when she talked about it, she meant the abuse at caveman. I was dazed. I no longer know what really happened, what I was just imagining, and what I was dreaming. But there's this one thing I actually think happened. She was silent for a moment, looking at him. He no longer looked at her. He was focusing on the valve adjustment. Outside the hospital one night, you came to me on your Harley in the middle of winter. I asked what your name was. You said your name was Diego, and I told you my name was Jenny. He had stopped tinkering, but he still didn't meet her gaze. How did you know my name? We had never met, had we? Yes, we had. He moved his hand under the frame and turned to something she couldn't see. We had met. We passed the driving test at the same time. Her eyes widened. Did we? We can't have. You must have driven much longer than I have, several years longer. The corner of his mouth moved. Of course, I've driven longer than you. I just haven't had my driver's license longer than you. Are you serious? You drove without a license? She made it sound like it's a mortal sin. She thought for a moment. Driving without a driver's license was bad. It was a serious offense. But in the world where he lived, it probably wasn't a big deal. She shrugged. Strange. I don't remember that we met then. Did we talk to each other? Not really. You and two guys of your kind were sitting in the waiting room. Of my kind? What is my kind? You know, the kind that wouldn't even think about driving without a driver's license. She frowned at his comment and crooked smile. Well, upper class, the happy, successful kind. She looked at him with increasing incredulity. Upper class? The two guys did as your lot usually do. They saw me when I came in, then they immediately looked away. They avoided looking at someone like me. Why not you? You looked at me, smiled, and said hello. He remembered how that smile floored him. It was the sunniest, warmest smile he had ever seen. She had looked at him as if he were one of them, without judgment. He had sat down next to her but had not come up with anything to say. He didn't want to hear him speak differently. Then maybe she would realize her mistake and do as the others, ignore him. So he had just sat there, waiting for them to call his name so he could do the test. Did I introduce myself? No, we didn't talk, but when it was your turn, you looked at me and wished me good luck, and I guess I wished you the same. Did they call out my name when it was my turn? I guess they did. He mumbled and gathered his tools. He didn't tell her how he had really learned her name, that he had seen her on the motorcycle a few weeks later. He had recognized her black leather jacket and long blonde braid down her back. He had simply memorized the registration number, then received her name and address via the car register. He didn't want to tell her that. Maybe she would think he was a fucking stalker. He wasn't stalking her, but since he was driving around anyway, he could just as well go by her house. It was exactly as he had expected. She lived in a nice townhouse area with a new car in the driveway. The happy, successful people. Those who abused neither drugs nor people. He rolled the bike out of the barracks. When he came back in again, she was sitting at the table watching him. I can't believe you remember my name all these years. He picked up the newspapers lying on the floor. Then I saw you a few years later. I saw you were with Keivan. I thought that was great. Why? Well, it was kind of proof that you were as good as I thought you were. You give everyone a chance. You don't judge anyone beforehand. Someone like you, he swept his hand towards her. Someone like you can get whoever she wants. And then you get together with an immigrant. I thought that was fucking great. She laughed. In fact, I'd never thought of Keivan as an immigrant until that night when they called him Wog. At first I didn't understand what they meant. Keivan, if anyone is upper class, that's him. His family lives in a large villa in Örgryte and they can afford to go to Iran every summer. Keivan's father Ahad is one of Sahlgrenska University Hospital's most famous surgeons, and his mother Fatima has her own company. She sells Persian rugs on the internet, and that company's made a profit, well, at least the last few years. If anyone is upper class, it's them. It was only when she fell silent that the meaning of what he was telling her dawned on her. He remembered her after a short meeting 5 years ago. He thought she was a good person. He thought she was good even though he knew everything she had done. He knew that she was the one who had chosen the path through Nordstan. He knew she had not helped Keivan when the attackers were about to kick him to death. He had been there. He had seen her helplessness, her weakness. Last but not least, he knew what she had done to Jari. He knew all this about her, and yet he thought she was special. He thought she was a good person. The cold of November penetrated the barracks, but Jenny felt warm. The heat spread through her body. It warmed her stomach, her arms, hands, feet, and earlobes. He thinks I'm a good person. He had just picked up the last pile of tools when she approached him, snuck close, and with her lips touching his ear whispered, "Thank you." The tools clattered against the floor. He put his arms around her and held on tightly, hard, as if he would never let her go.